language of education. Because even though now I'm glad that, for example, Botswana, mother tongue education is introduced primary level, the moment children go higher up, they're expected to pass in English for the Anglophone countries or French. And it really does stymie the potential that we could get in terms of science development. And then secondly, further, the issue of the ecosystem for startups and innovative ideas, leveraging indigenous knowledge. One of the huge challenges is that we do have a real problem of intellectual property protection. Even though we do have initial startups, most African innovative ideas get taken and pirated. So we need stronger biopiracy legal instruments and ethical instruments to ensure that there's also resources on the continent to go after the big companies that come and do biopiracy on the continent. Because oftentimes young researchers have ideas, but the ideas get taken up by other big companies. We saw with the COVID pandemic, the protectionism that perhaps you could say companies in the West were doing did not enable young scientists to optimize their intellectual property. So the big winners are not on the continent, and yet some of those technology of medical research came from the continent. So I think these are issues we need to also look at, clarify, and ensure that as we go further with the Agenda 2063, these are the protections and enabling environments we create for young people on the continent. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much for that contribution. Let the microphone go to the end. There's a gentleman, please stand up so that, yes.
Hello, my name is Basically, I just want to sort of like make a comment on the question that the moderator asked, but it's not going to be like verbatim. You were actually saying that what can we use to actually change the mindset of the government. So my question basically, I want to switch them and say, what can the government do instead to change the mindset of the youth? And what was shared is that if we were to really have a meaningful conversation nowadays on what we can do as young people, is that can we have discussions whereby in the middle of the table we have what is called thinking in the long term, whereby we say thinking in the long term boils down to one thing, which is access. Young people don't have access in Africa. We don't have. We have ideas, but we don't have access to those things that will enable us to carry out those things that we have in mind. So what I'm saying is that what is then an enabling environment in the mindset of a young person? I would say is, if we say mindset, enabling environment, we're saying, can we think of long term? Can you accept the reality that those people who are actually the pioneers, like let's say in government, who are the pioneers of these initiatives, they may not necessarily enjoy the success of those initiatives that they've put in place for the young people. So can they accept that so that we don't think from election to election, I'm in power now and I need everything to be done in the space that I've been given, and if it doesn't work out, then I cannot empower anyone else. Can we have people who can say, I don't care whether it takes 10 years or I don't care who's going to succeed me, but as long as the people that I'm actually standing up for will benefit in the long term, then we can say we are having like some serious conversation for the young people. So now, that would mean that we need radical change, strategic talk, and implementation. And if really we are to do anything, we need people who are going to think and say, we are no longer interested in having a conversation whereby you are on the other side of the table and we are on this other side of the table, and in the middle there's these conversations. We are saying, can everyone come on this side of the table and we think the same way? Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. So what I want to talk about is governance. So I know that a lot of young African people, young people have a lot of ideas, but let's not forget that we can only achieve and have innovation if we have good governance. If you look at most governments in Africa, So we have a president. So the president decides to choose their friends as the ministers. So if we can borrow a leaf again from Lee Kuan Yew, instead of and focus on pragmatism and meritocracy and giving people who have the actual qualifications to run these ministerial jobs for maybe innovation or health. Otherwise, we will always keep on regurgitating the same conversations that young African people have ideas, but the people at the top who are supposed to be putting the policies to help innovation become much faster are not actually focusing on doing that. They're focusing on keeping their pockets, much bigger. And that is the problem that we have. Again, to answer the question about my dear friend who talked about protecting patents for people in Africa. One of the things that I find quite interesting right now, there are a lot of talks about circular economy, sustainability, regenerative agriculture. But when you remember that our forefathers, these are the kind of things they were doing a very long time ago. So this is not actual new knowledge. It is something that we used to do, but the terms have changed, and we need to, as you said, have very rigid and very strong protection for indigenous knowledge, because it is very paramount. If we're able to fuse indigenous knowledge with what we have currently, that is also going to really spur innovation. Yes.
All right, Martin.
Yeah, thank you. I was just doing a quick Google here just to make sure I've got my stats right. I just think it's really, really important to study who's in the room. I don't think the presidents are here. I don't know if the ministers are here. So a lot of the things that we'll talk about has to be really targeted to people here and what can we do as a people, right? The one around government and what can government do, with that gentleman mentioned, I would really say, if you look at the countries in Africa that has the most FDI or the most investment flowing into them, these are conflict countries. Botswana is a shining beacon of democracy, but as safe as it is, Botswana is not showing up at the top of the list for countries that are getting FDI. Opportunity thrives where there's conflict. I think that's the first thing you need to understand. Bordering on that is if there is conflict, that's where you need to be as entrepreneurs. And I'm talking to entrepreneurs specifically. That's why when COVID happened, there's a lot of overnight millionaires, billionaires, they just boomed out of nowhere because there was a lot of turmoil. So as young people, it's very difficult to say we all need to be on this side of the room. That's nice. That's a nice to have. There's no incentive for the other person who's on that side of the room to invite you to the table to eat with them. There really isn't. And unfortunately, the reality is elections matter. There's a lot of things that we have to do as leaders, if I was a leader, to ensure that I am back in parliament for my next 5 years. So that really drives the way that I drive the conversations. Other countries are different, right? They built their economies over centuries. If you look to the East and the Middle East, Dubai was built, by these, by over 50 years, right? By the same rulers. But we don't have that consistency here. And that's the troubling factor that I just want to say. That's the reality of Africa. So if there's conflict, if there's issues, I want us as young people to start looking for opportunities within there and not expect government to come and help us. The second point is around, and I loved what the lady here mentioned around patents and all of that, right? It's really important. Great, I get it. We should do that. And it also depends in what industry you're in. For example, when Facebook or WhatsApp launched, then there was a Telegram, then there were all these other copycat apps, right? And the way Silicon Valley works is like, don't worry too much about people that are going to replicate your idea. If you have a great idea, there was a saying that says that invention is dead. Nothing new under the sun. There is nothing new under the sun. It's all about how can you innovate and capture a market, right? So if you create something and you're doing well and you've got first mover advantage, move as quickly as you can to capture that market. That's what I would say, and that's how we operate. We don't focus on the people that are going to come behind us and do what we do. If we were good at it anyway, they wouldn't do it better than us. The one around language is very, very important. Why are we not training people in their languages? But it's also important to note that our African languages are not scientific languages. They don't grow, unfortunately. If I look at Setswana, for those Botswana that are in the room, and the word that we have for technology, the word that we have for science, Maranyani, the word that we keep using the same word over and over for different things. When you go to a France, right, even the Afrikaners are better. They create new words, right? Just as the English language grows, they create new words. But in our language is getting smaller and smaller and smaller. So how do you expect us to grow and teach people with new technologies when we don't even have the language for that? So it's really important that we go back to the drawing board and say, how do we have institutions that grow our language? I think that's
all right. I'll pick one question from online before I go back to another round. There is Brian Nuhuereza, who's following online. He's asking, how's technology going to influence finance? And he thinks, won't it affect the social life with coming of AI?
Can you say that again?
I understand the question to be, how's technology going to affect finance, to influence finance? And the AI, and now how does AI affect that? Because AI is sort of just making that a whole mess in that sense. Wouldn't that affect the social life and every invention essentially that you're doing?
Yeah, I mean, she mentioned a very great point about M-Pesa, right? Technology is already affecting finance, right? Again, because there was an opportunity, because the banking system was not as great as it is. Botswana is over 80-90% banked. This is why mobile money cannot work in Botswana. When M-Pesa comes here, it can't work because we already have cards, right? M-Pesa has struggled to go into other markets outside of East Africa for the same reasons. But it's a great solution where there's a need, right? So already technology is influencing finance, right? Because technology is just an enabler. We just use technology to enable us to do things better, hopefully to become more efficient, right? So it's already happening. It's just now about the market. How do you target them? And how do you target them much better, right, to produce and leverage more value? AI, again, we're using AI. Even for us at Braston, we're continuing to use AI. But again, you use it to help you target the people. The need is always there. How do you then connect the market to the people and vice versa?
I think to echo what has been said about technology is how can we also use AI to model problems of the future and get solutions for them. I think that's the next frontier on how we're going to use AI. So I'd really like to see a lot of young people embracing the use of technology and also maybe quantum physics and model solutions for the problems of the future.
Okay, let me go to another round of questions. There was a lot of hands on this side. Let's start here.
Thank you to the panelists. My name is Dr. Kostomone. I'm with Novartis Sub-Saharan Africa. So I will, because I'm in healthcare, settle especially in what I tend to understand, which is healthcare. I was at a congress last week, and there were discussions around drug research, genetic research, and things like that. But what I realized is there is a lot of heterogeneity when it comes to Africa, in terms of capabilities, policies. I think Martin referenced a bit of that, as well as resources that are at our disposal. So you realize, for example, in South Africa, they have 1 or 2 facilities that are doing this particular aspect very well. In Zimbabwe, there is probably a center that is doing early drug discovery and research. And you know, in Uganda similarly. What is it that we can do to actually bring ourselves, you know, closer together so that we can kind of share, you know, experiences, platforms, policies, and capabilities so as to advance ourselves? Because there is a lot, definitely, of heterogeneity, and I would want to believe it is not just in health. You can think of, for example, the Starlink. There are African countries that have accepted it, and there are countries that are struggling to actually accede to that. So what is it that we can do to drive that?
Okay, great. Just hand the mic on your left.
Thank you very much. My name is Ngabrano. I'm a political scientist and sociologist. This being KUSI Africa Festival, we have to be realistic as youth. And instead of agonizing, we better start organizing. We are not going to reinvent the wheel, because what we are discussing right now, technology, research, this is what they were discussing in 1916, 1920s in America, in the UK. But what was their strategy? One, we must build institutions that outlast political regimes. For example, when you say Center for Disease Control in America, whether you're a Democrat or Republican, it doesn't matter. They will keep doing their research on disease. When you say CIA, whether you are a Democrat or Republican, if they wanted to overthrow maybe install a regime somewhere in a country like maybe, I don't know, maybe in Antarctica, they will still do it. So we must develop such institutions that outlast political campaigns. So in Botswana, for example, we can say we are going to start a center for technology research, and we establish it independent of the president who comes. Maybe the executive lasts for 3 or 5 years, and then it lasts for hundreds of years. It will always support innovation.
Let me ask you, how do you do that? So we know that, but how do you exactly establish those institutions?
Exactly. It's us, the youth, who force government to establish institutions that will be over and above. For example, when you say the police, whether you're a new president or not, you're not going to immediately change the police chief or the governor. You'll have to wait for his or her contract to end. Then secondly, on the issue of language, we build on the ruins of the former. When you check the British, English is now the most spoken language, but their motto is in French. You're aware? Dieu est mon droit, God and my rights. You check the English motto, English coat of arms. When you check the French, their motto maybe is in Latin. Then the Latins were building on the Greeks. In other words, a language takes years to evolve. So us, as Africans, instead of agonizing about not adopting English, not adopting French, let's adopt those languages. Then in 100 of years, when we have done so much research, our languages will develop. Because it has taken English 300 years to become the most dominant language. So I think we better be strategic in our thinking.
All right.
Establish institutions that will outlast political campaigns, but then work with what is happening. Then the future generations will have our local languages as the dominant ones. I thank you.
Okay, thank you. It's the gentleman on the right.
Thank you, Dumela. My name is Makarov Awotseng. I'm just making an observation here. I think one of the issues that you have to deal with when it comes to innovation is the issue that we hardly talk about, which is gatekeeping. You will realize that in America or in the Western world, most of the innovation is coming from the youth. You go to the Mark Zuckerbergs or the likes, you find that they have done those things when they were very young. But in our society here, you find it that it's hard. Unless you are from a corporate entity that is well established or a subsidiary, it's hard for you to get into the doors and come up with the innovation that you might have, that you might be able to offer. I'll give you an example. I've been staying in a place called Kasane in the Chobe region, where I did my primary school there. Then I went back there after years to go and work there for the past 5 years. The same companies that have been doing the industry are still the same. There's never been any change. There's no any innovation or technology that has been introduced. The same boats are still being used, the same everything, because the local young people there are not given the opportunity to step into the vacuum and come up with innovations. So I think I'm calling out on the corporates, such as those in the tourism industry, to open up doors for innovation, not necessarily from all those companies that are already established, which are already competitive. Because otherwise, ideas that are there die a natural death because there's the gatekeeping that I'm talking about. So I hope this will be taken into consideration for innovation to succeed. Thank you.
Okay. Can I get the final one here? There's...
My name is Itimeleng Seboko. I am a grade 10 student at Motswedi CJSS. I would love to comment on what that gentleman said. I would love to propose that STEM would be introduced in primary and secondary schools, because if a young person grows up to know that there's something called STEM and they can make an innovation because they were equipped and empowered at a young age, we would have more innovators in Africa. For instance, when you go to China, you'd find out that a 10-year-old student can be an innovator. So what I am saying right now, I'm appealing to the government and to the other organizations to have extracurricular activities of STEM in schools, for the youth to be equipped and to learn about STEM, what science is about, what careers they can actually go into in relation to science, because currently science is what we are going to. Science is all about, that's all what the world is about right now, science, science, and science. But that's something that you does not know. When a standard 7 student is asked, what do you want to be? They would say, I want to be a teacher. But if they're to be taught what opportunities they can actually explore in science through STEM, and as STEM being introduced as an extracurricular activity in primary and secondary schools, it could actually help. We could have more innovators. Like she said she became an innovator at 13 years old. And we can have more of that if the youth is actually empowered about STEM, if the youth is taught what STEM is about, if the youth is taught about the opportunities they can explore if they get into science. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Very well said and spoken. There's a gentleman at the back end who's insisted I take the last comment from him, the gentleman with a cap on.
Good morning. Oh, sorry. My name is Tumelo Bohatsu. I run a creative think tank called Bahisan. One of the things that I think is a very big challenge in our country is the level at which we execute creativity. Everyone is really trying to stick to rudimental work. People are working individually, so one of the things that I always encourage creatives is that if government or corporate is going to respect our work, we have to be doing it at very high level. We have to systematize creativity. We have to bring governance, build open spaces through creativity. Creators shouldn't be talking street language, they should be talking corporate language. And that's the only way we can be respected as professionals. So the biggest problem is that creativity itself is not being viewed as a profession. If I say that I'm a creative strategist right now, I'm not going to be respected the same as a strategist who's analytical. But at the end of the day, we need to start from the beginning. Creativity is the generative principle by which innovation is developed. It's not analytically, you can investigate other systems. You can investigate Western systems. And you can analyze them and try to readopt them into African systems. But there's always going to be a friction because you are addressing two separate cultures. So we need to come back to creative thinking, where we are generating ideas from investigating nature. It's not only science that investigates nature, it's also design. I studied interface design, and we would go out to nature and we would study biomimicry. So there's a lot in creative thinking, and we have done this research. We have investigated divergent thinking, convergent thinking, and aesthetics thinking, systems thinking. There's a lot of ways in which creativity really tries to unpack and take cultural principles and natural principles and see how we can turn them into products and services quickly. So these are some of the things that our innovation centers in Africa are not looking into. The fact that there's a different way of thinking. Right now, creatives are being taught that they should think analytically and critically, while in fact they should be thinking more creatively so that they can generate better ideas. And then that's when analytical thinkers can, and business developers can work with them to put the products into market. There's a whole system that needs to be reinvented. And if we are not looking into a different side and a different approach, we are talking mindset change, but the logo wasn't curated creatively. The moment you see a brain on a think tank model, on a think tank logo, you know that you're not supposed, according to principle of design, you're not supposed to put a brain of which is the subject that a think tank is directly addressing. So that these small principles that really cannot be understood by government, but they can be understood by a creative mind. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
So I'd like to paint a picture based on all those questions and also all those recommendations that have been mentioned, which are very great. Can you believe that there has been more research done on a tomato than the breast of a woman as we speak? So if you think about that, and Africa has the largest population of young people, we need to understand that innovation cannot happen on a silo. That's why this conversation we're having at KUSI is very important, because we are bringing different stakeholders, because that burden of innovation does not have to rest on the shoulder of the youth alone. Governments need to start doing work. If you look at Kenya, we have something called a startup bill. We need to have innovation bills in different countries. We also have something called the Global International Standard Organization. In Africa, sadly, in my country, a lot of young women and girls cannot be able to afford sanitary pads. So you find that Kenya is the third country leading in teenage pregnancies, because young girls have to trade their bodies to be able to buy sanitary pads. And why is that? Because we neglect researching on women's health. We also neglect putting women on clinical trials. This just to answer the question of the gentleman about how can we be able to have forums where scientific research is being done. I know you might be aware that we have the African Material Research Society that meets after every 2 years in different countries. And when you go to these places, a lot of conversations are discussed about different researches that are happening. So why can't we have an African research innovation system that every country can be able to contribute? Startup builds for every country in Africa, innovation builds for every country in Africa, so that when we come to, and maybe you can have an innovation conference as well, so that these issues that we are talking about can be able to be had by the different stakeholders, and also have policies that are done. And let's not forget that policy is implementation, and implementation is policy. Now, you may know that a lot of people say that Africa is very good at creating policies, but the problem starts when it comes to implementing them. So I think that's the kind of work that needs to be done first and foremost.
I fully agree with everything you're saying. I want to take a different approach, because I think you answered that quite adequately. And I really want to tackle the questions. Again, I'll lump them also into one bucket that are coming in from the floor. What I'm hearing a lot is around what government should do, what corporates should do. I think at some point you need to get to the point that they're either doing the best they can, they don't care, they're not going to do it. Then what? You know, entrepreneurship is not easy. It's hard, but we do it because it matters. Now, if you really believe that the work that you do matters, then I'll also say that it's better to ask for forgiveness than to ask for permission. Just go out and do it. You know, at least you will have failed, and then you move on to something else, right? So fail quickly, fail forward, right? And then move on to something. Sometimes the best bit of advice and knowledge you can get is that this doesn't work. So you're not spending all your time trying to do something that wasn't going to work. So I would just like, for a minute, for us to remove the focus on government and corporates. These are huge structures, right? They are huge structures. For example, I have an opportunity to work with Orange, and they receive hundreds of proposals. So sometimes it seems as if they don't want to support what we're doing, and the same with government. You know, they receive countless numbers of proposals. The best will win. But sometimes the best one that wins is one that has traction, because you tried it. And you're coming there with something that you're looking to scale up at an organization. So I really want to emphasize this point. Let us, from this room today, say yes, we spoke to government, we spoke to corporates, this is what we expect from them. But if they don't pull that weight, then what? It's hard what we do. We do it because it matters. Go out there and do it.
Okay, great. Unless there's a really creative comment from here. Is there any? Am I leaving any? Fantastic. We've exhausted this. There's a lady there who says she'll solve all our problem. Please.
Good morning. My name is Watito Pearl David. I'm a CEO of Volti Global Botswana, a franchise from America. I'm a BEAST graduate, so I deal with renewable energy. I am asking every Botswana here who is into natural indigenous products and they need space, I will give you solar power and you give me your idea, you pay me by employing other Botswana. So that's the initiative I have called Empower Smart Villages. So I give villages off the grid power, solar power, and then you go back to your home village and do donkey milk, honey, whatever that is you are interested in doing. And then you employ others. I do not rely on the government. I love my country so much, but yeah.
Okay, thank you for the solution. Thank you. Really appreciate it. I'm going to ask my panel to close this down in 30 seconds or less. Let me start with you, Mary. And I want you to give me just a proper outlook of how 5-10 years looks like for you in this new utopian world where we are achieving and we're all doing great and we're not relying on government. We just are doing well. Give me that look as your closing remarks. How does that look like?
Great. So for Africa, for the dreams of Africa to come true, for the 2063 agenda, what I'd like to see is that we have to come together. We cannot be able to underscore public and private partnerships to help us achieve that. And Africa, with all the resources that we have, the human potential that we have, and we spend 0.1% on research, then we cannot be able to achieve that dream. We have to put money and invest in research, in patents and also to stimulate education to have creative thinkers. So for us to achieve that dream, we have to spend money from the 0.1% on research to even ramp it up to maybe 20% of the money going into research. That is the only way we can be able to achieve our dream for 2063 and make Africa become the innovation hub that it's supposed to be.
Great.
Yeah, I want to take a divergent view. I really believe we have a lot of research. I think we still need more quality research, for sure, but what I really think we need more of is implementation. I think there's a lot of papers that are gathering dust that just need to see the light of day. So I would really go back to emphasizing that whole notion of experimenting. As governments, as corporates, as individuals, we just need to keep trying. Bold, persistent experimentation. I'd just love to see more failures, and at least in those failures, there will be one success story. One success story that looks like an Amazon that employs over 300,000 people, right? That's what we're looking for. Even if it meant that we had 100 failures. You know, we just need examples that look like you and I, so someone from your village can look at you and say, wow, if she could do it with the same opportunities that I had, I can also do that, instead of looking at your Mark Zuckerbergs and people that you can't identify with. That's the first thing. The second thing is, regional integration. We definitely need that. But for that to work, it doesn't work if there's no free movement of labor. And we spoke about this yesterday. You need that free movement of labor. Some of the biggest challenges that I have as an organization is Forex risk. You're earning in local currency, paying in dollars, and vice versa. And as you know, with the dollar, how much of a risk that is. We need to also address that aspect of how can I pay in my local currency and get paid back in that local currency, and it makes sense. So that's, if we can address the credit risk, the energy risks, the Forex risks, all those sort of risks, and definitely the free movement of labor, I think that will be really, really critical. To the entrepreneurs, again, guys, let's just pull up our panties, let's get out there, and let's just do it. Let's execute. I think that's the only way that, I think we need to change the mindset of chasing government and corporates. If you start doing, they will come running after you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. A better round of applause for our panelists on State of Technology, Science, Research and Innovation. Mary Nyarwai, CEO, Nyungu Africa. Thank you very much. Really appreciate it. And Martin Stimela, co-founder and CEO of Braston. They've done very well. I thank you all. Thank you very much. All right, ladies and gentlemen, our next panel will be when African youth can get behind the wheel. But just before that, I have some announcements to make for us. We are rescheduling the panel for yesterday, and we are now calling it a roundtable on Africa's agriculture and climate futures. That will come just before the panel on the scorecard, 20-year scorecard. So that is supposed to be in the afternoon, so we'll have that panel just rescheduling for that because of time in yesterday. And I'd also like to remind us that we have our next panel starts at 10:40, that is in 15 minutes. So we're going to take our tea for now. It's going to be upstairs, but let's be back in this room so that we are able to keep time and have all our panels run at the same time. And with that, I will give minutes.
This is NTV.